They say some buildings are alive. That's the only explanation I can give for Penhurst Asylum. The sprawling red brick monstrosity that sits abandoned on the outskirts of Spring City, Pennsylvania. From the moment I saw it, I knew it wasn't just another ruin. Its towers loomed over me like sentinels, windows dark and empty, the stones stained with decades of neglect. I had heard the stories. Locals warned me not to go, muttering about children chained to beds, screams echoing through corridors, shadows that moved on their own. But I'm a paranormal investigator, and I'd seen plenty of haunted places before. Or so I thought. That night, my team and I approached the asylum. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, leaving the building shrouded in fog. A cold wind whispered across the grounds, carrying with it the faintest hint of rot and decay. I felt it immediately, a weight pressing down on my chest, a sensation that made breathing feel heavy. Penhurst isn't like the others, my partner whispered behind me. Some say the energy here, it's alive. I nodded, gripping my flashlight tighter. We entered through a side door, one of the few that hadn't been boarded up. Inside, the air was thick with dust, mold, and something else. Something I couldn't identify. It smelled like old sweat, metal, and fear. My footsteps echoed endlessly as we made our way down the main corridor, our lights cutting through the darkness. The walls were lined with peeling paint and faded murals meant to comfort patients long ago. But now they seemed mocking, grotesque in the flickering flashlight beams. I noticed something immediately. Small scratches on the floor, claw-like marks that led down a hallway to a series of patient rooms. Probably rats, I muttered. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. We reached the children's wing first. Penhurst was notorious for its treatment of children. Many were chained to their beds, punished for crying or left in isolation rooms for days. As I walked the narrow hall, I felt an inexplicable chill. The whispers began. Low, almost inaudible at first, like the wind playing tricks, but the words grew clearer with every step. Help me. Please. Don't leave me. My heart hammered in my chest. I spun toward my partner. His face was pale, lips pressed tightly together. Do you hear that? I whispered. He nodded. We need to move on. This isn't right, but I couldn't. My curiosity outweighed my fear. I needed to see where the voices were coming from. We entered room 23, a small space with a broken crib in the corner. The air was icy, our breaths visible. I swept my flashlight across the room and froze. On the wall, a message had been scratched deep into the plaster. They can't hear us. They never listen. A sudden bang echoed from the hallway, as if someone slammed a door with tremendous force. I spun toward the sound, flashlight quivering. Shadows flickered in the corners of my vision, always moving just beyond the light. And then I saw her, a little girl, maybe 6 or 7, standing at the far end of the room. Her dress was tattered, hair matted, eyes black as coal. She didn't move toward us, but I could feel her gaze burning through me. Play with me, she whispered. The room's temperature plummeted. My flashlight flickered and died. Darkness swallowed us. Screams erupted around us, hundreds of them, echoing from the walls, the floors, even the ceilings. I grabbed my partner, and we ran blindly down the corridor, the sound of small footsteps chasing us, growing faster and faster until we burst into the main hallway. We regrouped in what used to be the administration wing. My team tried to calm me, but I couldn't. Something was in the building with us. Something angry. Something that remembered the decades of pain and suffering and wanted acknowledgement. We set up cameras and EVP recorders in the most active areas, the isolation rooms, the underground tunnels, the morgue. Hours passed, and the recordings revealed more than we could have imagined. Voices crying, children giggling in dark corners, whispers pleading, "Don't leave, help us." And then there was the laughter, low, guttural, not human at all, echoing through the halls like a predator enjoying the hunt. By midnight, the activity escalated. Doors slammed shut around us. Shadows darted across walls. The whispers became screams, intelligible now, shrill, desperate. "Get out! Get out! We're still here!" One of our team, Jake, disappeared. We were in the main hallway setting up cameras when we realized he wasn't there. His flashlight lay on the floor, spinning slowly. We called for him, but the only reply was the sound of dragging chains from the basement below. I grabbed a rope and descended the narrow stairwell. The basement was cavernous, filled with old equipment, rusted beds, and broken medical instruments. And there he was, Jake, pinned against the wall by invisible hands, eyes wide with terror, unable to move. I ran to him, pulling with all my strength. He screamed as the air itself seemed to resist us, a pressure pushing against our bodies. Finally, with a desperate heave, we broke free, stumbling up the stairs and out of the basement. Outside, the fog had thickened. The asylum loomed like a nightmare frozen in time, its windows glowing faintly in the darkness, though no lights were on. We didn't speak much on the way back. The car was silent, except for the occasional sobs from Jake. No one questioned what we'd seen or felt, because deep down we all knew. The energy in Pennhurst was not just residual, it was alive. It fed on our fear, our presence, our acknowledgement. The footage we reviewed later was worse. Faces pressed against the cameras, children with hollow eyes appearing behind us in the corridors, whispers repeating our names over and over. And one recording, a single, chilling voice clearly audible, said, "You can't leave, not until we are remembered." I left Pennhurst that night knowing I would never be the same. Every time I close my eyes, I hear the screams of the children, the dragging of chains in the basement, the little girl whispering in room 23, "Play with me, forever." Even now, years later, the nightmares follow me. I can still feel the weight of those halls pressing down on me. And I know, deep in my bones, that the forgotten souls of Pennhurst are still waiting for the next visitor, brave or foolish enough to enter. And maybe, just maybe, they're waiting for me too. There's a certain kind of fear that doesn't come from what you see. It comes from what you feel. A weight in the air. A presence that wraps around you, pressing at your chest, whispering in a voice you almost recognize. That's how I felt the first time I entered Beechworth Lunatic Asylum in Victoria, Australia. I had heard the stories, overcrowded wards, lobotomies, cruel punishments, and a chilling history of despair. Patients were admitted with the simplest of ailments, only to disappear into a system that considered them disposable. Some say that the suffering never left, that their spirits still wander the halls, chained by fear, anger, and torment. I was young and skeptical, eager to explore. I wanted proof, something tangible, something real. What I found was far more than I bargained for. This is the story of Eliza, though she never introduced herself. The asylum sits atop a hill, looming over Beechworth town like a grim guardian of its own dark history. The brick walls are scarred with decades of neglect, the windows broken, many barred with rusting iron. It's massive, corridors branching endlessly, wards stacked one after another. Walking through the main entrance, I immediately felt it. A cold, wet heaviness in the air, the scent of decay, faint but unmistakable. My partner Daniel stayed close, whispering, "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Some locals say you can feel them watching before you even step inside, I laughed, though my hands trembled slightly. That's exactly why we're here. We passed through the main foyer, where old reception desks sat beneath peeling paint. I noticed names carved into the walls. Patients from a century ago, many long forgotten. Their presence lingered. I could feel it, prickling the back of my neck. Our first stop was the female ward. History tells us that women at Beechworth were subjected to treatments far worse than anything allowed today. Electroconvulsive therapy, isolation, and strict restraints were common. Many were confined for life over minor complaints or behaviors. Walking down the corridor, the echoes of our footsteps sounded wrong, deliberately delayed, like the building itself was mocking us. Every door we passed seemed to breathe, sighing open and closed ever so slightly, though no one was there. Then I heard it, a soft, dragging sound behind me. I froze. Daniel stopped too, gripping my arm. The noise came from one of the patient rooms. Slowly we approached, flashlight beams cutting through the gloom. The door was cracked open. Inside, the air was ice cold, our breath fogging immediately. A rocking chair moved slightly, though no one sat in it. And then I saw her, Eliza, a woman young, maybe in her 20s, dressed in tattered hospital garments. Her hair hung in greasy strands over her face. She sat on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, whispering to herself, but not words I could understand. They sounded like gibberish, yet terrifyingly melodic. I called out, "Hello? Are you?" She snapped her head up. Her eyes were black, empty, endless. She tilted her head unnaturally, her lips stretching into a grin that was all wrong. And then she stood, moving toward me, her movements jerky as if her limbs didn't belong to her. I stumbled back, heart hammering, as the door slammed shut behind her with a deafening crack. We tried to flee, but the corridor seemed longer than before, twisting impossibly, walls stretching and contracting. Daniel grabbed my arm. "We need to leave now." But before we could move, whispers filled the hall, hundreds of voices overlapping, crying, laughing, begging. "Don't leave. Don't go. Stay. Play." The sound was deafening. I felt my knees buckle as shadows slithered across the walls, forming faces, twisted, screaming faces of women, girls, and even children. They reached for us, phasing through the walls, grasping at our clothes, scratching at our skin. I remember screaming. Daniel screamed, and then we ran. The wards gave way to the basement. History tells us Beechworth had a morgue and punishment cells below ground. We didn't plan to go there, but in our panic, we fell through a trap door, landing in darkness. It was worse than the upper floors. Chains hung from the ceiling, rusted and swinging as if moved by invisible hands. Bloodstains, ancient, crusted, yet still horrifying, lined the stone floor. And in the center, a figure crouched. Eliza, or some version of her. Her limbs were twisted, her body contorted like it shouldn't be human. She whispered, "Play with me forever." Suddenly, dozens of shadowy figures rose from the walls and floor, surrounding us. Their eyes glowed faintly, like embers in the dark. The dragging sound intensified, hundreds of chains moving at once. The air itself seemed to resist our movement, pressing against our chests, making every step a struggle. I grabbed Daniel and we pushed forward blindly. A door appeared ahead, though I was sure it hadn't been there moments ago. With every ounce of strength, we burst through it, spilling out into the night air. Outside, the fog rolled in, cold and wet, but alive. It whispered names, patients, staff, the forgotten. Daniel collapsed to the ground, gasping. "We can't stay here," he stammered. I nodded silently. But even as we drove away, the feeling lingered. Every reflection in the rearview mirror seemed to hold a face, a shadow watching. That night, I dreamt of Beechworth. I dreamt of the screams, the shadows, and of Eliza reaching for me. And when I woke, I realized something terrifying. The whispers had followed me home. Don't leave. Stay. Play. Over the following weeks, I experienced it everywhere. In mirrors and dark corners, even in the quiet hum of my apartment at night. Every time I thought I was alone, I felt her presence, Eliza, and all the others. Patients who suffered, tormented, forgotten, whose screams were never heard. Until now. I've returned to Beechworth since then, a few times, recording EVP, video, and documenting my experiences. Each visit confirms the same truth. The asylum is alive. Its energy remembers. Its shadows hunger. And the spirits of those who were broken there are still trapped, waiting for anyone foolish enough to enter. They call it the Death Tunnel, a mile-long concrete chute sloping down beneath the ground, built to transport the dead discreetly, so patients at Waverly Hills Sanatorium wouldn't see the endless parade of corpses leaving the hospital. They say more than 60,000 people died there during the height of the tuberculosis epidemic. I had seen photos online, crumbling walls, long, dark corridors, graffiti marking years of trespassers. But nothing could prepare me for the feeling of stepping inside. I wasn't just there as a tourist. I wanted proof. Cameras, EVP recorders, thermal scanners, the whole kit. People talk about shadow figures, disembodied screams, the infamous creeper that crawls along the ceilings and walls. I wanted to know if it was real. But some things I've learned you don't want proof of. The night we entered, the sky was choked with storm clouds. Lightning cracked over the Gothic structure of Waverly Hills, illuminating its broken windows like eyes glaring down. The building rose like a tombstone against the night, its long wings stretching out like the arms of something long dead, but still reaching. I wasn't alone. My friend and fellow investigator Maya came with me. She was fearless, at least she thought she was. She'd been to haunted prisons, old hospitals, abandoned churches, and had never flinched. Just remember, she whispered as we approached the entrance. Whatever we see, we don't run. Running gives them power. I nodded, but my hands were already slick with sweat. Inside, the air was thick with mold and dust, the smell of decay clinging like cobwebs. Our footsteps echoed too loudly in the silence, bouncing off cracked tiles and peeling paint. We started in the main wards, long open rooms lined with beds where patients once lay gasping for air. Lightning from outside flickered through broken windows, momentarily illuminating rows of rusting bed frames like skeletons. That's when we heard the first sound. Not footsteps, not voices. Just breathing. Heavy, wet breathing echoing through the ward. But the room was empty. Maya raised her recorder. If someone is here with us, can you tell us your name? Static. Then faint but clear. Don't leave. My blood ran cold. We moved deeper into the building. On the 4th floor, the most haunted according to legends, we stopped. Locals say shadow figures roam here more than anywhere else. At first, it seemed quiet. The hallway stretched endlessly, doors yawning open on either side. But then, movement, a figure, small, childlike, standing at the far end of the hall. Maya gripped my arm. Do you see it? I nodded. My flashlight trembled in my hand. The figure didn't move, just stood there, watching. Hello? Maya called. The figure tilted its head, then darted into one of the rooms. We rushed forward, adrenaline pushing us on. But when we reached the door, nothing, empty room, no exit. That's when I noticed it. On the wall, scratched into the plaster, were words written over and over again. We all die here. The fourth floor had shaken us, but it was the basement that nearly broke me. The death tunnel. A yawning mouth in the earth, stretching downward at a steep angle. Cold air poured from it like the breath of the grave. Maya's voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed fear. This is it. If anything's real, it'll be here. We descended. The tunnel was suffocating. Damp concrete walls dripped with moisture, and the sound of our steps echoed endlessly. About halfway down, my flashlight flickered and died. Darkness swallowed us whole. I fumbled with the batteries, cursing under my breath. That's when I heard it. Something moving above us. Not footsteps. Crawling. I froze. Maya whispered, "Do you hear that?" I nodded. We aimed our backup lights upward, and there it was. The creeper. A mass of shadow clung to the ceiling, human in shape, but twisted, limbs bent at impossible angles. Its head rotated unnaturally as glowing slits, eyes, I think, stared down at us. Then it began to move, crawling along the ceiling like a spider, impossibly fast, closing the distance. We ran. We didn't care about giving it power anymore. Fear propelled us down the tunnel as the sound of scraping claws chased us. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but the thing was right above us, matching every step. We burst through the end of the tunnel, collapsing into the cold night. The storm had broken, rain pelting down, thunder crashing. I looked back, nothing, and the tunnel yawned empty. But I knew. It wasn't gone. It had just let us go. The weeks after Waverly Hills were the worst of my life. Maya stopped answering calls. Her last message to me was a voice recording, just static and faint whispers. And me? I hear it every night, crawling, scraping along the ceiling of my apartment, waiting. I don't think we escaped. I think Waverly Hills followed us home. I never believed in curses. That's the truth. I'd seen the documentaries, the YouTube channels, the ghost hunting shows that swear every abandoned place in America is crawling with demons. I laughed them off, convinced it was all camera tricks and gullible people looking for attention. But when my college roommate, Derek, suggested we visit the Bell Witch Cave in Adams, Tennessee, I surprised myself by saying yes. Not because I believed, but because I wanted proof there was nothing there. The Bell Witch legend is one of the most famous American hauntings, the kind people grow up hearing in Tennessee. Supposedly, in the early 1800s, the Bell family was tormented by something inhuman. It whispered, scratched, and slapped them. It cursed John Bell, the father, until he grew sick and died. Some say it was the spirit of a witch named Kate Batts. Others claim it was a demon pretending to be her. But one detail remains constant. The Bell Witch doesn't just haunt a place. She follows you. That was the part that intrigued me. How could a story like that still survive 2 centuries? Surely, if there was any truth to it, someone would have debunked it by now. So, on a cool October weekend, Derek and I made the trip. The town of Adams was small, barely a few roads and scattered houses. The locals weren't exactly thrilled to see 2 outsiders carrying recording gear. When we mentioned the cave, the waitress at the diner stiffened and muttered, "Don't go in after dark." That was all. No explanation, no smile, just a warning. Naturally, we ignored it. The Bell Witch Cave is privately owned, usually open for tours during the day. But Derek had a cousin who knew a guy, one of those small-town connections, and somehow we ended up with permission to enter after hours. The property owner only shook his head when he handed us the key. "Whatever happens in there," he said, his voice low, "don't say her name out loud." Derek grinned, but I noticed his hand tightened on the flashlight. We arrived just before sunset. The farm looked ordinary at first. Rolling fields, a few trees. the remains of an old cabin marked with a plaque. The cave itself sat at the edge of the property, hidden by brush. It wasn't large, just a jagged crack in the earth leading down into darkness. "Kind of underwhelming," Derek said, adjusting his camera strap. "Exactly," I replied. "All this for a hole in the ground." We entered anyway. Inside, the temperature dropped immediately. The air was damp and stale, the kind of cold that sinks into your skin. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, echoing like footsteps. Our flashlights bounced across rough stone walls, revealing carvings, initials, and graffiti left behind by tourists over the years. For the first half hour, nothing happened. We recorded, we explored, we joked nervously about how disappointed we'd be if we didn't catch at least one ghost. And then, while filming in the main chamber, Derek asked the question that changed everything. "Is anyone here with us?" At first, silence. Then faintly, a tapping sound. 3 knocks. We froze. I tried to reason it away, dripping water, rocks settling. But then it came again. 3 deliberate knocks, closer this time. Derek's camera shook in his hands. "Holy shit. Did you hear that?" I opened my mouth to answer when a whisper slid through the chamber. Not an echo. Not the wind. A voice. "Leave." Every hair on my body stood on end. The word was stretched thin, raspy, but it was clear. We weren't imagining it. Derek whispered, "Ask something else." "No," I snapped, my voice too loud in the chamber. "We got what we came for. Let's go." But Derek, always the idiot, smirked at his camera. "Oh, what's your name?" Silent. Then, louder, closer. "Kate." Flashlight in my hand flickered. I tightened my grip. "Turn that off," I hissed. Derek looked confused. "What?" "Don't say it." "Don't ever say her name. That's what the owner told us." He raised an eyebrow. "Come on, man." "That's exactly what we need. Proof." Before I could argue, something struck. Not me. Not him. But his camera. It flew out of his hands as if yanked, slamming against the wall with a sickening crack. We both screamed. Derek scrambled after the pieces, but the camera was destroyed. And then came the laugh. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even fully audible. But it slithered through the chamber like smoke, high-pitched, cruel, and ancient. That's when Derek finally panicked. "Okay, we're leaving." Now we bolted for the entrance, flashlights swinging wildly. But the cave wasn't the same. Passages that seemed familiar twisted differently, shadows stretching into impossible shapes. I swore the tunnel had split, forcing us down a path we hadn't entered. Somewhere behind us, bare feet slapped against stone. Running. Fast. "Don't look back," I screamed. But Derek did. He froze mid-step, his face pale, his mouth open. His flashlight dropped, clattering against the ground and rolling to a stop. I grabbed his arm and yanked. "Move!" We ran until the faint glow of the entrance appeared ahead. Bursting into the open night, I collapsed onto the grass, gasping for air. The cave mouth yawned behind us, silent and black. Neither of us spoke on the drive back. That night, I woke in the motel to whispers. Not muffled, not vague. My name, over and over. At first, I thought it was Derek, but when I sat up, he was snoring in the other bed. The whispers didn't stop. They grew louder, circling me, slipping into my ears. And then came the weight. Something sat on my chest, crushing my lungs. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. A shadow hovered above me, featureless but heavy, its fingers brushing my face. "You let him speak it?" I tried to thrash, but my body was paralyzed. Tears stung my eyes. The shadow leaned closer, and though it had no mouth, I heard the words as if they were inside my skull. "Now I follow." The weight lifted. Air rushed back into my lungs. I gasped, clutching my chest. Derek stirred, half asleep, mumbling something about a nightmare. I didn't tell him. I couldn't. But when morning came, he noticed the bruises around my neck, finger-shaped. We never went back to the cave. We didn't post our footage. Most of it was ruined anyway. Derek dropped out of ghost hunting completely, swore off anything paranormal. Me? I tried to move on, but the whispers followed. In my apartment, in my car, even in broad daylight, I'd hear faint laughter. Mirrors would show smudges like handprints. At night, I'd wake to the same crushing weight on my chest, her voice slithering into my ear. You came to me. You don't leave until I say so. I thought she was tied to Tennessee. But I was wrong. She wasn't bound to the cave. She wasn't bound to the farm. She was bound to me. I never believed in ghosts. Not really. I'd always chalked up strange noises or flickering lights to bad wiring, old pipes, or tricks of the mind. But when you're a paranormal investigator, disbelief doesn't last long. At some point, you encounter something you can't rationalize. For me, that moment came at Rolling Hills Asylum. The place had a reputation. Built in 1827 as a poorhouse, it became home to criminals, orphans, the mentally ill, and the unwanted. Thousands passed through its halls, many never leaving. Over 1,700 deaths were recorded there, and God knows how many were never documented. People say the walls themselves absorbed the suffering. I'd read the stories, the shadows that walk without bodies, the phantom footsteps, the growls in the basement morgue. But the detail that stuck with me most was this. Visitors swore they could still hear screams echoing through the halls at night. Not human screams anymore, but something warped. When I finally got the chance to spend a night there with my crew, I thought I was prepared. I wasn't. We arrived just after sundown. The asylum loomed against the horizon, a decaying fortress of brick and broken windows. Vines crept up the walls like veins, and the roof sagged in the places where time had won. Even standing outside, I felt the weight of it. The silence wasn't empty. It was expectant, as if the building itself was listening. Inside, the air was thick with dust and mildew. My flashlight beam caught flakes of paint peeling from the walls in long, curling strips. Doors hung crooked on their hinges, and the floor creaked like old bones with every step. Our plan was simple. Split into pairs, sweep the different wings, and regroup every hour in the main hall. I was with Alina, one of our newest members, eager but green. She tried to hide her nerves behind a nervous smile, but I could see the way her hands shook when she adjusted her camera. Don't worry, I told her, as we stepped into the east wing. Most of the time, it's just noises, shadows. Your mind fills in the rest. She nodded, though her eyes kept darting toward the darkened hallways. The east wing had once housed male patients. Rusted bed frames lined the walls of one room. Mattresses long since rotted away. Graffiti covered the plaster. Names, pentagrams, crude faces. As we moved, the beam of my flashlight cut across something scratched deep into the paint near the floor. Help us. The letters were jagged, frantic, carved by a hand that had bled for it. Alina crouched to film it, whispering, "This doesn't feel right." I started to reassure her, but then we heard it. A sound so faint at first, I thought it was the wind until it grew louder, screaming, distant, echoing through the corridor. It wasn't one voice. It was many, men, women, children, layered together, rising and falling in waves of anguish that made my skin crawl. Alina grabbed my arm. "Tell me, you hear that?" I nodded, heart pounding. "Yeah, I hear it." We followed the sound, moving deeper into the wing. The screams seemed to shift, always ahead of us, pulling us along. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, doors on either side yawning open into darkness. My flashlight flickered, and then it stopped. Silence crashed down so suddenly it rang in my ears. That's when one of the doors slammed shut behind us, hard. The bang echoed through the hall. Alina yelped, spinning around, camera trembling in her grip. I yanked the door open. Empty room. No one inside. We pressed on. At the far end of the hall, we reached a set of double doors, their glass windows smashed out long ago. Beyond them was the infirmary. The smell hit us immediately. Mold, rot, and something metallic like old blood. Inside, rusty gurneys lay overturned, and cabinets with shattered glass revealed jars of preserved organs that had somehow survived the decades. A single wheelchair sat in the corner, facing the wall. As Alina filmed, I swept my light across the room. That's when I saw it. A figure. Tall, thin, standing just inside the doorway across the room. I froze, breath catching in my throat. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe. My light stuttered, and for a split second I thought it was just a trick of the shadows, but then it stepped forward. Alina gasped. Oh my God. It was a man, or what was left of one. His eyes were hollow pits, skin stretched thin over bone, his mouth frozen in a silent scream. His body flickered like a bad signal, here and not here, real and not real. I raised my flashlight, and in that moment he lunged. Alina screamed as the figure charged, vanishing just before reaching us. The wheelchair toppled over, crashing onto the floor. We bolted, running out of the infirmary, our footsteps pounding down the hall. My chest burned, lungs screaming for air. But we didn't stop until we reached the main hall where the others were waiting. Their faces went pale when they saw us. You look like you've seen a ghost, one of them joked weakly. We did, I snapped. My voice shook. We heard the screams. We saw him. They exchanged uneasy glances, but none of them doubted us. Not here. We decided to stick together after that, moving as a group into the basement, the morgue. The stairs groaned under our weight, and the deeper we went, the colder it became. The air grew damp, heavy with the smell of decay that had lingered for nearly 2 centuries. The basement was worse than the upper floors. The walls sweated with moisture, and the ceiling hung low, pipes snaking overhead. At the end of the hall was the morgue itself, the old body storage drawers still embedded in the walls. We set up our equipment, EMF readers, digital recorders, motion sensors. Almost immediately, the meters spiked. Static buzzed through our radios, and then the screams started again. Not distant this time, not muffled. They were right there, with us. The sound filled the basement, bouncing off the walls, so loud I clamped my hands over my ears. Alina dropped to her knees, sobbing. One of the crew shouted, but his voice was swallowed by the noise. I forced my eyes open and saw hands pressing out from inside the body drawers. Dozens of them. Pale, rotted, clawing against the metal as if trying to break free. The screams rose to a fever pitch. My vision swam. Lights exploded in bursts as the bulbs overhead shattered one by one. Darkness closed in. In that chaos, a voice cut through. Clear, cold, right beside me. You belong here now. I spun, but no one was there. Only shadows. Only emptiness. And then, nothing. When I came to, I was outside. Dawn had broken. The others were around me, pale and shaken, refusing to speak of what had happened. Our cameras were destroyed, batteries drained, footage corrupted. The only thing I had left was the recorder I'd shoved in my pocket before the basement. When I played it back later, my blood turned to ice. For 47 minutes straight, there was nothing but screaming. Not ours, not human. Something else entirely. And underneath it, faint but unmistakable, was the voice I'd heard in the morgue. You belong here now. I never returned to Rolling Hills. But even now at night, when the house is quiet and the world is still, I sometimes hear them again. Those endless screams echoing from somewhere just beyond the veil. And I wonder if maybe I never really left.